I'm Gary Leff and I write the blog View from the Wing. It was the very first frequent travel blog on the internet. I've been writing it for the last 10 years. And for the last year and a half, I've been involved with a frequent flyer community called MilePoint. MilePoint.com is something I co-founded where frequent flyers come together, meet and talk about their travel experiences and how to make that better. And today I thought I'd share some tips with you about how to get upgrades for your flights. It used to be that folks would walk to the airport and show up dressed very nicely and maybe say it was their honeymoon and hope to get upgraded. And frankly, that's really not the way that it works. It used to be that flights might be empty and the gate agent would have some discretion about who to move up from the back. And so once upon a time people did get upgraded this way. Now it's very rare. First of all, because the flights themselves tend to be full. That means there aren't a whole lot of seats to get moved up into. If you're going to show up and hope at the airport that you get upgraded, your odds are very low. Second of all, gate agents don't have the same kind of discretion that they once did. And the reason is that upgrades are generally processed by a computer. Their systems take care of everything. They decide who's supposed to have it. And usually that's based on a person being a frequent flyer or maybe buying a very high-priced fare just below the fare class they're going to get upgraded to. And they'll be given that free upgrade if it's available. But you can still be fairly strategic in booking your airline tickets if what you want to do is get an upgrade. And I think that there are two basic ways that people are going to get upgraded. And the first one is being loyal to a single airline and earning elite status. That usually comes beginning at 25,000 miles flown a year with most airlines, but goes up. There are various levels that note higher levels of status, and the higher your level, the higher you're going to be in the pecking order for upgrades most of the time. And the other basic way is spending frequent flyer miles. You can use your frequent flyer miles for merchandise like an LCD toaster, a free ticket to Florida, or an upgrade to business class. There are really also two different areas where the upgrade processes are different: domestic flying and international. The thing to understand is that the experience is also very different. Domestically, you're usually going to get a bigger seat, and on a longer flight you might get a modest meal, whereas internationally you'll frequently get a seat that turns into a bed, and in first class a fine dining experience. There's going to be a much bigger difference between those two, and it really all depends on your travel patterns, what you're going to be most interested in. Domestically, most of the first class seats are going to be going to people that have elite status. They're buying a coach ticket just like anyone else, and the fact that they stay with an airline very frequently, they'll usually be given that first class seat for free. Internationally, it's a little bit harder. Elite upgrades are going to usually require a higher fare class. You have to spend more money on your ticket, and the only airline that doesn't require that of their top level elites is American. Now, elite upgrades are not something that everyone's going to get, and not only do you have to be that 25,000 mile flyer, and 25,000 mile flyers can have a hard time. They're not going to get upgraded most of the time. Except in my experience with US Airways. In my home market, I live in Washington, D.C., they have a substantial presence at Washington National Airport, and they seem to do a very good job upgrading their lowest tier elites. And I suspect that they must not have nearly as many elites as their competitors, because silvers and golds and certainly platinums, but not beyond their top tier elite members, do get upgraded very, very frequently. If you don't fly as much as a heavy business traveler might, you still do have the opportunity to fly in first class. People that have frequent flyer miles in a program can usually use those miles for upgrades. American is probably the most generous with that, along with US Airways, although American is going to charge you a cash copay in addition to your miles in order to be able to upgrade even on domestic flights. They're going to charge $50. United's going to charge that copay too, and it's going to be a sliding scale amount based on the fare that you're buying. But you can spend your miles and be up front, and United does privilege miles over their elites who are looking for free upgrades. So even if you don't have any status, you're not a frequent flyer with United, but maybe you have their United visa and you've earned a lot of miles in their program, you can request that upgrade, and you're going to be fairly high in the upgrade pecking order because United views that as a paid upgrade. You're paying with miles rather than paying with cash. And so you have priority. You can fly first class domestically just as somebody that accumulates frequent flyer miles. And that's generally true with most of the airlines, although Delta is going to make you buy a higher fare in order to be eligible to use your miles for an upgrade. Internationally, you're always going to pay that cash copay unless you're buying that more expensive fare. You combine your miles with cash and your paid fare in order to get that upgrade. But you're still able to buy that at a substantial discount relative to what those fares usually cost. I mean, certainly I would not find myself buying $8,000 or $10,000 international tickets for business class, but if you find yourself on a $1,500 fare and you're willing to spend an extra $500 each way plus miles, you can then be in business class. While we're on the subject of spending miles and money for an upgrade, you can also just spend money. And I'm not talking about buying a first class ticket. If there's an empty seat on the day of departure, you check in, airlines will often make those seats available for a modest amount of cash. They'd rather take some money for the seat than see it go empty. There aren't often a lot of empty seats in first class, but if there are, you'll be able to claim those for a small amount of money. But you're really rolling the dice that the seat's still going to be there. In an era of full planes and computerized allocations of upgrades, the upgrade world is very different than it used to be. It's not the case that flashing a smile at check-in and dressing nicely and coming up with an excuse is going to get you the upgrade very often. The very best thing you can do, though, is give yourself as much priority as possible, either by having the highest level of frequent flyer elite status or by spending those miles to confirm an upgrade. Sometimes that upgrade will take a little bit of cash in addition to the miles, but parting with miles can be a very good way of getting that first class seat and a much greater amount of comfort at a discount.